Hi there, welcome to the Wellbeing Training Academy. My name's Abby Twomlow, psychologist, psychotherapist, and anxiety practitioner.
Hi, and I'm Andrew Farquharson, and I'm all of those things too.
And this week for our podcast, we are focusing on improving teacher wellbeing, and we're looking at all things wellbeing when it comes to teachers, because you are important people in the world, and you are supporting the next generation of humans coming out into the world. So your wellbeing is really important, so that we're teaching learners how to have really good wellbeing as well. Where do we start, Andrew? This is a massive topic, isn't it? I think there's lots of people, there's lots of teachers out there from my experience of been in teaching myself and working in schools that either ignore their well-being a little bit, or they're not really sure what teacher like struggling with teacher well-being looks like. I think they're kind of, if they haven't got a diagnosis, then they just kind of plow on and assume that they're fine. I think a lot of teachers are in the habit of focusing on learners and pupils and their well-being, and they forget about themselves a little bit sometimes. What do you think?
I think that's all right. And a lot of people, not just teachers, but I think a lot of people, when they think about well-being, think about sort of the more dramatic end of the sort of mental health area, such as, I don't know, schizophrenia or whatever, those types of things. And of course, that is part of it, but most of it is just how things accumulate. And I know from, again, from my experience, having worked in education, that you just get on with it and you just sort of battle through. But actually, that's really counterproductive because in the end, you grind to a halt. So maybe we could just sort of explain a wee bit what we mean by well-being.
Yeah, because like you say, I think people just look for those labels, don't they? They look for anxiety. We all know about anxiety, depression, um, stress, I suppose, although there's different levels of stress. But yeah, I think when we're talking about well-being, it's really easy to look at those boxes and those categories rather than just generic well-being. So I was looking into the top areas that teachers struggle.
Mhm.
Um, and there's four main areas where teachers struggle with their mental health and well-being. And the first one of those is stress. And that might be minor stresses that you just have to deal with through the day, whether that's about pupil behavior or workload, that kind of thing. But stress, how would you define stress?
Well, stress is I mean, it's a sort of circular thing because it's combined with anxiety. Stress is more the physical aspect of anxiety in a sense. Um, you feel it, it can affect different parts of your body, um, and then this can lead to all sorts of other things which can make you feel more anxious, which then can make you feel more stressed. So it's a sort of circular thing. But anxiety is just in general terms, it's a bit of a fear of what if. What if
Yeah.
this happens and what if that happens? And I think we tend to focus in on those what ifs as opposed to, oh, that's great, that's good. Lots of things are going well, and we just build on that. The way that I sometimes see things like looking at anxiety, for instance, is we tend to have it looks a bit like a hand in front of our face. And that's what we concentrate on. And that blocks out the rest of the room. And you could say the rest of the room is our lives. But what all we see is that. But in general terms, teachers have a lot of anxiety, whether it's are they teaching okay? Do they have a lot of work, like you said, their workload? Is there going to be an inspection coming up soon? All of that sort of thing. Is there going to be another review of the curriculum? So it's all adding to anxiety. And so, in one respect, I don't think they actually recognize
No,
anxiety.
I think teachers recognize worry, and
Mm,
worry is something that happens up here, isn't it? And
yeah.
anxiety is how you respond to that worry. So all those what if questions, those are worries, aren't they?
Mhm.
Whereas stress tends to be, a physical response to something either that's coming up or that might happen or that's happening at the moment. So you might have to do, I don't know, let's say you've got an Ofsted review tomorrow. Most teachers I know feel a certain amount of stress, and that can be the sweaty palms, the increased heart rates, the that sort of knot in the pit of your stomach. That's the stress response, isn't it? And I think
Mhm.
stress is normal. We're supposed to feel stress, but I think we apply stress to parts of our lives that don't necessarily need it a lot of the time. And we're not sure how to manage that either because we have that belief that stress is created by whatever that thing is, whether it's your workload, whether it's that um, inspection, whereas actually it's how we look and think about things that create that stress, not the thing itself. So you're more likely to feel stressed if you think, oh, I'm going to fail, or I'm not doing a good enough job, or I can't get this done, or they're not going to like me, or they're not going to think I'm doing it. It's those thoughts that create those stresses more than the actual inspection. Because there's some people out there that find those things really helpful. So it can't be the thing itself that creates the stress. It's how you look at and think about that thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's how you react to it. And there are lots of things that happen in life, Ofsted or inspection, that you can't do much about. They're
Mhm.
going to happen. But what you can do is determine how much you respond to it or you react to it. And because you then feel as though you have some sort of control, the general anxiety and therefore your stress levels reduce. But it's how to do that,
Yeah.
which is something. And the funny thing is that when teachers are stressed or anxious about things, this actually communicates to the children.
No
Uh,
matter how hard you try and cover that up, I'd just like to say they still always pick up on it, even when you think you do a great job of hiding it.
yeah. And that's very noticeable. And it can also, not only did it pick up on it, it can also affect the pupil's mental well-being.
Yeah.
And so if you have a fairly positive sense of your own well-being, then you can be more empathetic. You can be foster a sense of security and belonging in classrooms, etc. So it's not just about yourself. It has a spin-off.
Yeah, and what I was going to say as well is if you have got staff that don't know how to manage and control their stress, how can we expect learners to manage their stress or create less stress? That you can't have that expectation. So you tend to find that teachers that are more stressed tend to have classrooms that are more stressful in
Mm,
return, don't you? I was just having a look at some stats earlier on, and 83% of teachers worry about work problems when they're not at work. And that worry definitely ties into stress and anxiety, doesn't it? So that's 83% of teachers that are worrying about work when they're not even there. So it's no wonder that stress actually is high on the list of areas where teachers are struggling. Um, yeah, and I think you were saying about the physical side of that, and I think that ties in quite nicely with our next one, because the second area where teachers are struggling at the moment is insomnia. And I definitely think that that is a physical response to stress, isn't it?
yeah, it's physical in the sense that you don't sleep. Things going on in your mind, going round and round and round. Some people might say overthinking things, but it's still just things going round and round, and you've not been able to cut off and shut down. And it all comes back to just that thinking, that worrying. So you could say, well, what's the definition of worrying? Well, it's basically just thinking about something.
Mm.
And some people could say it's anxiety, which is a bit thinner. Again, a sort of spin-off is it affects your family, your home life, and your friends, because if you're not if you're not turning off or you're not being able to control that, then the way that you are then can affect your husband, wife, your children, and which then can lead to more stresses,
Yeah.
strains.
And when
So
you're stressing, like you say, the stress then causes the overthinking. The overthinking um, leads you to not sleep because you're lying. You tend to overthink most, don't you, when you're stationary? I tend to
Yeah.
find that people I work with overthink the most, either when they're in bed or when they're in the car, when you're sitting still. um, and you're not focusing on anything else because your brain can only actually think one thought at a time. So it tends to be when you're not doing anything else that you overthink the most. So yeah, I think that's where the insomnia comes in for a lot of people. And also you could argue that ties in with workload. I know a lot of teachers that go home, have their time with the family, get the kids to bed, and then they sit down to work and they've got a huge list of stuff to get done and they're not sleeping then. And I think particularly in teaching, there seems to be just a never ending to-do list. I think you could just keep going and going and going. There doesn't ever seem to be an end point, does there, with work?
No, but actually that's not a bad thing in one sense. And forgive me, everybody, for saying that. But what I mean by that is if there's a never-ending to-do list, then it's a lot easier just to say, well, right, okay, I can stop now because you know you've got. Whereas if you've only got one thing and you've got to get it finished and it's got to be done and it sort of stretches on a little bit, you feel that you've got to plow on through it. I hope that's just making sense to you.
I think that depends on mindset. I think if you've got the right mindset, that can make it easier to draw a line. But I think if you haven't, or if you're a sort of perfectionist, you're always going to try and do as much as you can. So you're going to feel like you've got to try and keep on top of it. And when you can't keep on top of it, then that starts impacting your self-esteem and you start feeling like you're not doing a good enough job. So that's the issue with having a never-ending to-do list. And that's why 85% of teachers lose sleep and spend a lot of time worrying, I guess. And I also think that over 80% of teachers feel too tired when they get home from work to actually do anything they enjoy. So they're not looking after themselves either. And that can be really difficult because that again then impacts your self-esteem. So all of these things sort of interlink, don't they?
Yes.
You're getting
And
stressed and then you're not sleeping and then you're tired and then you're more stressed and you're not, yeah, you kind of hone in on all the things that you're not doing instead of focusing on the wider area to look after yourself. And I think it's really easy in teaching to just forget to look after yourself because your whole job role is about looking after other people, isn't it?
the thing is that when you're tired, then you're much more likely to make mistakes,
Hmm.
which then feeds into your low self-esteem.
Yeah.
And also, when you're starting to feel more anxious about something, your ability to think creatively narrows. So then it makes either you don't do the job you wanted to do or whatever it is, which then, as you rightly say, sort of just goes round and round and round. But
Mhm.
as it's going round and round and round, it's also spiraling down.
Yeah,
So what are we going to do about it? That is the question.
it is. About which bit, I guess. Because I was gonna say like this that the next area that
Mhm.
teachers struggle with is burnout, which is kind of the end point to all of that, isn't it? That's where
Yeah.
you've literally got nothing else more to give. And I think that's where people then start signing themselves off work and they just can't cope or they're having to medicate these feelings of overwhelm and stress and they just feel like they can't manage. And that's an increasing problem. In fact, burnout's at an all-time high in the last 5 years. So post-COVID, burnout is significantly got worse within teaching statistically. And I think that's because of all the other areas that we're talking about here, isn't it? There's higher stress,
Hmm.
less self-care, greater insomnia, all these different issues. And I also think that there's quite a big problem in schools where teachers don't feel like their well-being matters either. They feel like their mental health isn't the school aren't interested in their well-being or schools feel like they can't do anything about teacher well-being. Oh, it's something that they're struggling with at home or they're not managing this well and they feel like they're not as cared about post-COVID. And I can't quite put my finger on why that is.
Maybe historically it's because the type of professions didn't need that because they were all smart and able people and should be able to look after themselves, which is complete nonsense because And this might come as a surprise to many of the pupils, but teachers are human beings. They're affected by not only work, but affected by outside of work. They're also very dedicated people,
Mhm.
and want to do the best for everything. And there's that sort of sense of it. But a lot of the schools or local authorities or whoever it is who employ the teachers, they don't necessarily realize that they have a legal duty of care.
Mhm.
The Health and Safety at Work Act, for instance, covers not only safety and physical well-being, but it covers mental well-being. Mental well-being in a general sense, in the wider employment area, sort of, I think it was about 2 years ago, it was reckoned that about 40 billion pounds worth of business was lost due to mental well-being, or lack of support for mental well-being.
Yeah.
And one of the daft things is that it's actually an area that's relatively easy to sort of take care of.
Yeah.
Um, and if you do want to take a look at the sort of financial cost of things, and not even look at the human cost of stuff, for schools themselves, it would actually save them money to look after their staff well-being and not just have a tick box exercise or do what is called well-being washing. Um, it because burnout, for instance, it leads to absenteeism.
Yeah.
It also leads to a lot of people leaving the profession.
Yeah.
I don't know the stats for this, but I would imagine that
Well,
most people leave is to do with burnout.
I've got some stats here. So 74% of teachers have considered leaving their current job in the last 12 months, and 67% of them have considered leaving the profession in the last 12 months. So that's a huge amount of teachers. 67% considering leaving teaching.
Yeah,
That would be catastrophic, wouldn't it?
yeah. And to come back to the point about just the financial point,
Mm.
I get the human point, but the financial point is then you've got to retrain the
Yeah,
teacher. You've got people then that need to bed in a particular school, into the particular culture of the school. It all takes time, it takes money that you don't need to spend.
yeah. And actually, teachers in their early career, I think it's more like 90% of people that struggle within their first year of teaching. And a huge amount of people leave after the first year. So we're doing something really badly wrong in teaching for people to feel like that. And I think part of the issue is we wait for people to be at crisis point before we help them, before we wait for them to be a really big problem before we try and do something.
Mhm.
Whereas actually what we need to be doing is creating a place where people feel nurtured and feel cared about, and there's that environment where people feel well supported to not need to feel those stresses and burnouts and things in the first place. We don't want to be waiting for people to get there before we help them, or saying, oh, sign yourself off sick or go to your GP, because that's to the extreme. We need to be creating schools that are good for people's well-being, that improve your staff and learner well-being,
That's right.
rather than just trying to fix it when it's already gone wrong.
And it comes back to that slogan that we use every now and again. It's prehab, not rehab. Um,
Yeah,
and ag- again, also the school culture. It
yeah,
affects that. If you've got, so just if we take that 70, what was it, that 70 odd percent that thinking
yeah.
about leaving, if you take that in a school, imagine you've got 70% of your teachers considering leaving at any time.
It was three quarters of your staff.
Yeah. How
74% is nearly three
good.
quarters of your staff.
Yeah. That would consider or are in the process of thinking about leaving. Uh,
Yeah,
but it is true that people that look after their staff, whether that's teaching staff or other people that work in the school, who are
yeah.
just as important for the whole school to function,
Mhm.
if they feel supported they're actually more productive,
Yeah.
which means that the school will be a better have a better learning environment, which then impacts on the children and spreads out. So it's from that point of view, it's a win-win. Um,
And you work better as a team to manage those issues like workload and burnout, and you can work together to reduce those things because it shouldn't just be about leading from the top. It should be doing things together as a team. If it's a school where that's an important part of the ethos, it's not just being told what to do. It's about developing these ideas together, isn't it?
mhm.
Because again, there's a huge amount of people that are saying that well-being is just not seen as important in their school, or they're being held responsible for things that are out of their control within school. And that's not a healthy environment to be working in, is it?
It is important that the school culture does come from the top
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
does trickle down. It doesn't matter if everybody at the who's not in the management area uh, has this idea if they don't do it, because that's
Yeah.
where it comes from. A couple of ways that you could have to reduce burnout, because that's the main area, I suppose, is setting boundaries. So, for
Yeah.
instance, as you say, when people come home, they feel they've got work to do. Yes, all teachers do extra work, and many of them work more hours away from the school than they are when they're in the school.
Yeah.
Uh, but you have to set boundaries.
Yeah.
Now,
You've got to be prepared to draw a line, haven't you?
yeah,
And sort
and
of,
and even if it's just to the extent of I'm only going to work an hour, or I'm not going to work after 9 o'clock, or something like that. And if you're talking to a pupil about how to structure something, how to do something, you would probably say to them, well, let's make a plan.
yeah. And
So
be realistic.
yeah, a realistic plan. So just make a plan.
Yeah.
You can say, well, get home, we're going to make something to eat. If you've got children, do something with the children, then do whatever it is. Then I'm just going to watch an hour of TV or something like that. But it sort of breaks it. It sets boundaries. Also, in these days of 24-hour access, i.e., texts and emails and so on, it has been known for certain colleagues to text, to send ideas, send things, communicate about things. Just again, if that's happening to you, turn your phone off.
Well, you can even mute conversations,
Yeah,
can't you? So I think it's
yeah,
important that you set boundaries or you draw a line and say, okay, well, that's fine till like 8:30 or 9 o'clock. And then actually, I'm going to mute that conversation until tomorrow.
yeah,
But then, if you've got a head teacher that's feeling like it's appropriate to send emails at 2 o'clock in the morning and expecting you to respond, then that's difficult as well, isn't it? So I think that's where you say it's got to be a ripple down. You've got to have management that respects staff well-being
mhm,
and ensures that other people are following suit. You have to lead by example, and that's why it's really important that leaders are getting it right as well. They have to draw a line for their well-being, else they're going to be stressed and not managing people well as well. So
yeah,
yeah, drawing a line is a definite top tip, I think, isn't it? Creating boundaries and drawing lines under work. Another one, as I think, is, and you might even need to timetable it in, is to make sure that you are making time for things that are not work and doing that self-care, even if it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, if it's, I don't know, one exercise class a week or just your favorite TV program and you're not sitting marking books while you're watching it, doing something that you enjoy doing, because over 80% of people that are too tired to do something they enjoy, that's no good for looking after yourself. And again, if you're talking to learners in school about looking after themselves, it's one of the first things you'd be saying to them. What do you enjoy? What do you do for you? Well, what are
mhm,
you doing for you?
yeah.
Because we spend so much time focusing on our family, our kids, our our learners, our work, that we kind of get put to the bottom of the pile a lot of times, I think, as a teacher. So yeah, making sure that you make that time for yourself to do something not work related and not doing it at the same time as doing your work.
Well, yes, that's right. Not trying to multitask, so watch the TV, mark your
Yeah,
thing, and also send a text at the same time.
yeah.
Um, Fortune 500, the sort of American top business magazine, they
Mhm.
did a survey of what it was to be a successful leader. And one of the top tips that came out of that was every day just turn off for at least half an hour.
Yep.
You know, no phone, no nothing, just be able to, maybe you can just sit there, or you can read a book of something else, or you could go for a walk or something like that. Good if you could do it for about an hour, but at least you do it every day. And it
Yeah.
sort of helps to cleanse you of the anxious thoughts.
Well, actually, it's really important for your brain to process your day. There's a lot of information and data that goes through your brain in a day, and your brain needs that shut-off time,
Yeah.
process everything, to get rid of the stuff that's not important, to file the stuff that is important. That's why sleep is so important as well. So getting a good night's sleep and switching off is really important for your brain function. Um, your memory will be better if you're getting enough sleep and enough rest time. There's so many benefits to actually getting rest and sometimes being bored as well. So
Yes.
not feeling like you have to do something, just doing nothing is important for your
Mm.
brain as well, because it just gives it that time to just filter and sort your day and make sense of things and function well.
And just in one general way that you can help if you're feeling worried or feeling anxious is just to do a very simple breathing exercise. Because what it does is when you breathe, I mean, yes, I breathe all the time, so why do I have to do an exercise? Well, actually, most of us don't breathe properly. And that is just taking a deep breath in, just holding it, and slowly breathing out.
Mhm.
And what that then does is means that the oxygen that you breathe in is diffusing into the blood supply really effectively because you're utilizing all of your lungs. And then that sort of saturates your brain and just takes the edge off things. A way to do that is just breathe in for the count of 4 and hold it for about the count of 2, and just slowly breathe out for about the count of 6. And you can do that once or twice or 3 times. And the good thing is it's portable. You can do it
Yeah.
anywhere.
I think
Um,
that it's quite a handy one if you're feeling stressed about something, isn't it? Just as a good sort of break point to just kind of take that breath, and it helps you to take a step back and get a bit of perspective sometimes as well, which I think is important, isn't it?
yeah. And the thing is that doing that type of breathing is actually nature's way of helping us reduce stress.
Yeah.
Imagine for a moment that you have to go for an interview somewhere or going for an appointment, and you have to go to an office and you have to ring a doorbell to get there. Just before you ring the doorbell, you will automatically take a deeper breath and slowly breathe out. Because before you ring that doorbell, anxiety provoking, because you've no idea what you're going into. You don't know
Mm.
who you're going to meet, what they're going to be like. And so you just take that deeper breath, and that's unconsciously.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure everybody will relate to that, especially sort of with interviews and things like you know that they say your name, you're like, oh, right, here we go.
Yeah. And so just practice doing that, and that can then kick in as
Yeah.
well.
And it also gives you the opportunity, and this is my final top tip really, is to focus on what is going well. I think you can spend a huge amount of time on what hasn't been done, what's gone wrong that day, who's playing you up, what you need to get done by the end of the day. We're constantly focusing on the stressy points, aren't we? The negatives and the got tos. Whereas actually, what has gone well this morning? What have you done well? Have you stayed calm in a moment that was quite stressful? Have you helped a student to understand and get a light bulb moment? Focus on the things that are positive rather than the things that you're dreading or that are negative, because we can get a bit lost in those. And it's focusing on those things that will bring us back to being stressed, that will bring us back to being overwhelmed. So just having that breath and taking a moment to think about the positives in your day can be really powerful.
Yeah. Initially, when you do that, if you're not used to doing it, it can be quite hard.
Hmm.
So write it down. You can draw a line down the middle of a page or something, and on one side you can say all the things that have gone well. The positives don't need to be huge things. It can be just, yeah, that was good, or like you were saying, you help somebody to see something or whatever it might be.
Even if you just had a full cup of tea and drank it and didn't leave half a bit cold. That's a positive in a day of teaching, isn't
That's
it?
that's
You
that's a
finish a cup
definitely
of
positive.
tea.
Yeah, that's it. It's the
Take the
tea
small
theory.
wins.
The tea theory. But yeah, so just do that. And they're just a few things. You don't need to spend ages doing these things. They're just um, very easy to do. And they
Just about
really,
checking in
really,
with yourself during the day, isn't it? Just keeping a check on yourself as well as everybody else. And it is something I think, like you say, to start with, you have to make a bit of a conscious effort to do, but it only takes a couple of weeks of doing that and it becomes a bit more automatic and you really start noticing a difference quite quickly if you can be consistent about it.
I think we maybe just sort of stop there
Hmm.
a moment. And when we come back in future podcasts, what we'll do is we can maybe focus in a little bit more, give some more tips on how to help with different situations, because it is it is essential for teachers' well-being that they look after themselves.
Yeah,
And these tips, like you said, is bits of self-care. And if they do that, then that not only helps themselves,
yeah,
it helps their family, immediate families, it helps the learners, and it
their
helps
team as
overall as
well.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. And if everybody's doing similar, the impact that has on a school is massive. And you
Oh,
don't need all these huge interventions or these, Wellbeing Wednesdays. You don't need all these specific things if you're just doing things well as part of your day.
that sounds really good place to end at the moment. If you want to get in touch with us, just look at the email address. Thanks for watching, and thank you, Abby.
Yeah, thank you. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with our next podcast. So keep an eye out and perhaps subscribe if you found today helpful or useful. And we hope to see you again in future. See you
Yeah.
soon.
Okay. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.